just do an introduction. So hello everybody and welcome. This webinar is showcasing the work of 4 of our community rail partnerships and it's around White Ribbon Day 2025 and overcoming barriers to gender-based barriers to travelling and violence and intimidation against women and girls. So the format of the webinar is that we'll hear from each of our 4 speakers in turn. They'll do about 10 minutes each for us, and then we'll take questions all together at the end. You're also welcome to put questions in the chat as we go, and then we'll go through these at the end as well. Okay, so the recording of this webinar will be available through the Community Rail Network website and the YouTube channel. So you'll find links to these in the Member Services section under Past Event Materials. So I will now hand over to our first speaker, and that's Julia Singleton-Tasker from Heart of England CRP. Over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Jenny, and morning, everyone. So as Jenny said, I'm Julia Singleton-Tasker. I'm the lead Community Rail Partnership Officer from the Heart of England CRP. So for those of you that aren't as familiar with the CRP area, we cover 36 stations in Coventry, Warwickshire and Solihull, so right in the heart of England, as the name would suggest. So we've actually been working with White Ribbon since 2022. I think it first came to our attention. I was trying to think actually how it first came to our attention, and in all honesty, I can't remember because it was quite a few years ago now. But I know at the time West Midlands Trains were going through a process where they were looking into becoming accredited with White Ribbon, so they were quite keen to work with us. Obviously, coming out of the sort of the COVID era, we were very aware of people having numerous barriers to train travel, and we were looking generally at how we could help people to feel safer on our trains and help to kind of raise awareness of women's safety in particular. It's also a personal passion of mine as a martial arts instructor. You know, I teach self-defense, so I think it's incredibly important that not just women but everybody is kind of aware of how to be in a safer environment, and if we can do things to help prevent that, then it makes my job a lot easier as well. So excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cough, so hopefully I won't cough too much during this. So hopefully with the slides work. There we go. So in 2022, as I said, it was our first year working with White Ribbon, and we decided to take over a train, basically. We did consider just kind of going to stations and handing out leaflets, which we have done for other projects, but we wanted to do something that really made an impact and that allowed for deeper conversations with people. So rather than just catching people on their way in and out of train stations where, you know, people tend to be in a rush, you don't tend to get that many people who want to stop and have a prolonged chat. We decided to commission an artist, Emily, who we've worked with before. She worked on a project called Creative Platforms with us, which was based around using art to help those with anxiety, again, related to COVID. So we knew that she was great. First of all, her artwork is lovely. It's simple, it's kind of effective. She's very good at dealing with members of the public, talking to her and kind of explaining what she's doing and her concepts behind things. And also it had the approval of White Ribbon, the charity. So she designed the postcards that you can see just down here for us, which gave a little bit of information about White Ribbon and a QR code. And then we basically took over a train on White Ribbon Day in 2022 between Leamington and Nuneaton. And we were joined by colleagues from West Midlands Trains and West Midlands Rail Exec. And Emily drew on the windows with chalk paint. So it was a really simple idea. She had her designs kind of mapped out, and she went along the train and drew these amazing sort of murals, essentially, these window drawings. And while she was doing that, we were able to talk to passengers, we gave out the postcards, and we also gave them their own chalk pens, and we were encouraging them to draw their own white ribbons so they could kind of feel involved in the process as well. You know, they were creating, they were adding to the art. Um, it turned out that people wanted to draw more than white ribbons. As you can see by this gentleman here, they kind of got a little bit more creative with it, which was lovely to see, actually. You could see them really sort of getting into the zone, and um, it then it almost made conversation a lot more natural because we were able to talk to them about what they were drawing, and they were a lot more interested in talking to us about white ribbon, and it was just a more natural conversation with the passengers. I think the only thing that was particularly difficult, and luckily I didn't have to do this, was cleaning the windows at the end, because I think West Midlands Trains, the train team wanted the windows clean pretty much straight away afterwards, which is a bit of a shame, but I do understand. Um, but that was great. That was a really high impact, but very simple and quite cost effective. You know, it was the price of chalk pens and the price of Emily, for, you know, a couple of hours, and it was great. It was really good. Um, so in 2023, we went to Snow Hill and supported White Ribbon again with West Midlands Trains. And that time we just had a long length of white ribbon that we asked people to sign their pledge. So again, just something a little bit different, getting people to interact with us rather than just kind of giving them out a leaflet. We were asking them to do something, so it felt more proactive. But in 2024, we wanted to make more of an impact. So we decided that we wanted to create a project that was funded by West Midlands Trains Your Community, Your Fund. And the initial idea was that we were going to commission an artist to work with two groups of men, one sort of Solihull, Birmingham based and one Coventry based. And the artist would work with the groups, and they would have input from White Ribbon, and they would learn about what the White Ribbon message is. It would empower them to become sort of White Ribbon ambassadors almost. They would be able to go out and spread the message and help sort of teach and educate other men and boys about the message. And then as a group, they were going to create artwork for 7 stations between Tile Hill and Birmingham. So that was the plan. It all went wrong, basically. I'm going to be very honest with it. There were numerous issues with the project, unfortunately. It started with, unfortunately, I had quite a bit of time off last year, so I wasn't able to manage the project. So it fell to West Midlands Trains, had to kind of manage as best they could from their part. The artist that we had initially thought was great and we thought had really understood the message of White Ribbon. And when we commissioned him, we had a panel made up of people from White Ribbon, West Midlands Trains, Avanti, because they had commissioned a mural at Birmingham International as part of it. So we had all kind of agreed on this one artist. We thought, yep, he's great, he's got experience. And unfortunately, the artwork he sent back was not at all appropriate. You know, his initial design ideas, he was uncommunicative. I mean, in some ways, I'm quite glad I was off because I didn't have to deal with it, if I'm being very honest. But it was not, it was one of those things where it was a real shame because the project had such potential, but unfortunately, the person that we chose to deliver it just couldn't deliver what we wanted. So some tough calls had to be made. You know, we had this project, we had the funding for it, we still wanted the artwork, we still wanted to promote that White Ribbon message, but we had to kind of rethink around, well, how can we do this? And luckily, we asked Emily to stand in again. You know, we knew her, we knew that she already understood the White Ribbon message, we knew that White Ribbon Charity liked her artwork, and she understood the sensitivities around creating positive messaging for White Ribbon. So that's what we wanted. We wanted positive messaging for men, not just kind of being very negative around it. And she came up with different artwork, and you can see some of her sketch ideas on this slide. And we've ended up with 5 pieces of artwork at stations that have a combined footfall of 1.8 million. And that's at Tile Hill, Adderley Park, Hampton and Arden, Marston Green and Stetchford. So although the project is not how we intended it to be, and there were a lot of lessons learned, and unfortunately there were just different circumstances that meant that the project couldn't go as smoothly as we wanted to. We've still ended up with artwork at stations that encourages people to look and to just question. And that's the point. They ask questions of people. Um, they're asking, how are you standing up against men's violence towards women? What are you doing? It's not kind of telling them what they should be doing, but it's just asking them, getting them to be a bit more self-reflective. Another part of that project was to create a mural at Birmingham International. And again, with this one, we had to change our original plans. The original plan had been to have a mural painted on a wall, but because of things like permissions, getting the wall prepared, cost of doing that, and also, the weather in England isn't always that reliable, we changed it to having panels being printed up and installed on a wall that was under a shelter. And it's a slightly smaller wall, but actually the position of it at Birmingham International, it's on platform 1, and it's a place where more people, when they're stopped on the train, it's there, they can see it, it's much more impactful. This was installed on the day before White Ribbon Day in 2025, and this part was funded by Avanti West Coast. And again, we did a launch with, we had a bit of a photo shoot with White Ribbon. The CEO of White Ribbon came along to it. And it's really nice because now along that line between Tile Hill and sort of Birmingham, we've got 6 stations with White Ribbon artwork that can be seen from the train and on the platforms. And in fact, by the end of March, we'll also have another, Emily will be doing another piece of artwork at Rugby Station. So, it's kind of continuing on that theme along that line of really promoting the White Ribbon message. And because Emily now is an artist that she, again, White Ribbon trusts her, it's kind of that consistency with the messaging, with the design type. It provides that cohesiveness as well. So yeah, that's been our way of kind of helping to promote the White Ribbon message, and yeah, get it out there in a slightly different way, but one that gets it into the public eye. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Julia. That is just really fabulous, really impressive, especially the reach and the number of people you've reached there. But we will move swiftly on, and I'll hand over to Lynda Spain from Southeast CRP. Lynda. Are you there, Lynda?
Yes, sorry, I'm just going to share my screen.
Lovely.
Please shout if that's not. Is that shared?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay. Sorry, I'm going to stop sharing and just share it a different way because I can't see it. Hang on a minute. Right. Does that look like a slideshow? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Sorry, I'm Lynda Spain from the Southeast Communities Rail Partnership, and we did our Your Community Cares campaign on the 25th of November to coincide with White Ribbon Day. And this sort of started out as a conversation between myself and Claire from West Sussex, who's on the call today, so she can chip in and correct me where I'm wrong and add anything she wants to share. We were in a cafe and we were talking about White Ribbon Day, and West Sussex County Council and us at the SCRP had decided we were going to do something for White Ribbon Day last year. And so we started that conversation and we came up with this idea, again, following on from what Julia said, a sort of softer message about to men and women about what White Ribbon Day is all about. So we worked collaboratively with the County Council, and Claire came up with the idea of why don't we ask the library service to put a note out to their knit and natter groups that meet across the county to say, do you fancy knitting a few white hearts for us? Because we thought that actually being at stations and giving people white hearts would be a kind of soft way of starting conversations. So Claire put the message out to the library service, and we expected to get a couple of 100 hearts maybe donated through the libraries. I'll go on to what happened with with that sort of under expectation that we had. So yes, we wanted to sort of talk about your community cares message was one that was just sort of further, it extends further than just White Ribbon Day, but we had the card that you can see on the screen and had some QR codes on the back of that card to help people to direct to the right services. So we coincided the Your Community Cares with White Ribbon Day, and that Claire managed to get the cards printed. So the cost of getting was minimal. We didn't really have a budget sort of allocated to this, and we weren't expecting it to quite go as far as it did, but it's all good. So Claire had, I think, 2,000 cards printed, and we thought, well, we're going to have loads of cards left over at the end of this, but we can use them again if it's been successful. So the aim of the campaign was to just raise awareness of support available to those affected in a sort of gentle way, and also to make a link with our knit and natter groups through the library services, and sort of bring the community further into railway. And we came up with the idea of, making kindness travel further as our sort of strapline for what we were trying to achieve. So what happened? So yes, Claire put the call out to the knit and natter groups and the crochet groups about knitting some hearts. They were invited to drop their knitted hearts at any library across the county, and also any railway station. So we made sure that GTR were included in the messaging, so they knew that some people might drop hearts directly at railway stations, which some people did. And then we sort of commandeered our station partners, volunteers. Claire was really good at getting the British Transport Police and other strategic partners, the fire service, all involved in let's be at stations handing out some of these white hearts with the little card. So Claire was brilliant at that, and we sort of got in touch with our station partners along the West Sussex routes, and some of them were very happy to volunteer to be at stations because we couldn't be everywhere at once. So it was a gentle and uplifting message, care and compassion, not campaigning, and we wanted to approach people very sensitively and positively, and then just start conversations. So that was the intention on the day. So what we weren't expecting was 7,500 knitted hearts donated by the knitters and crocheters across Sussex, and they came in bags from way beyond. I got a bag sent from Shropshire. It kind of really sort of captured people's imagination and attention. So Claire was brilliant. She got 40 partner organisations involved, and we had people at more than 20 stations across West Sussex, and it did go beyond. We had people at Ashford. Network Rail said they wanted to give out some hearts at Ashford International, and one of our colleagues was approached by Eastbourne Borough Council. They wanted to do something at Eastbourne, so it did go beyond the sort of West Sussex remit. So yes, on the day it wasn't too chaotic, although Claire probably disagreed because I think she was on about 20 trains that day going around distributing. But it did go further than we thought it would go. So we thought this is an idea that really has captured people's imagination, and it's given us partnerships that we never thought we would make with all of those community groups across the county and beyond. So we've had a meeting to sort of try and wrap up what we're going to do. I think I might there's just some of the things that we felt were, were the impact of the campaign. We had lots and lots of feedback from passengers, lots of conversations were started, and we are pretty sure that I know for a fact that several people sought help and support as a result of those conversations and that little white heart. One lady said to me at Hove Station, I'm going to go and put this heart straight on my husband's grave, which is a beautiful thing, but it wasn't, it's kind of like goes beyond the original idea of the White Ribbon Day. So that's some of the feedback. There's some of our volunteers, some people at Lancing, some people at Worthing giving out the hearts, and just some of the comments that people made on the day. So just bring in Claire, if you're there, to just sort of talk about from your side how.
Absolutely. Thank you for inviting me today as well. I can genuinely say that when I first started working with the rail sector, I worked in partnership for 27 years. It was a completely different piece of work and way of working for me. Yet actually, really the best 18 months of my career for a very, very long time. So it's been a really positive, and continues to be a really positive partnership. I think for me in particular, prior to the campaign, we had some quite high-profile instances of marks of abuse and intimidations of our stations, and so we had done some survey work, some community engagement, and people were telling us that overwhelmingly, although they hadn't ever experienced first-hand witnessed incidents on their training network. Sorry, this isn't great. Hopefully you can hear me. They were saying that the impact of having friendly faces, of having some kind of guardianship at stations, and about having people who were visible and actually genuinely expressed caring and attention to their station made a significant positive impact to them. And so for us, the campaign obviously coincided with White Ribbon Day, but extended far beyond that. And this notion about creating stations as caring places, about reclaiming them as community spaces, really
sorry, we've lost your sound, Claire. I think your microphone's dying. Sorry, Lynda, do you want to pick back up? Sorry about that, Claire. We just totally lost your sound.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, Claire's been having microphone problems, I think, for a while on her laptop. Yeah, so any questions for us then, obviously, we're happy to take them. But I think that what Julie was saying about a simple idea and a gentle message was one of the things that we thought worked particularly well for our region. And we are planning to do it again this year, but we are going to try and manage it slightly differently and a little bit less chaotically, because we didn't know what response we'd have. We thought it would be just Claire and myself at a couple of stations giving out some lovely hearts, and we ended up with 7,500. And what we didn't want to do is let people down with they've taken the time to be part of this campaign, and they've knitted, and they've talked about it in their groups and given us these hearts. So any remaining hearts that we had, we went along and hung on Christmas trees at stations for people to take off the Christmas tree. So that carried on. So we will manage it slightly differently this year, but I think we will, we're happy to share. If anybody wants to do something similar, we're happy to share our experiences. Yeah, we thought it was one of the best things that we'd done all year, actually.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Lynda and Claire, so much for sharing that. And connected to that, I'm going to hand straight over to Sara.
Hi, I'm just going to start sharing my screen, and I am Sarah. Yep, Sara Grisewood, also from South East Communities Rail Partnership. And thank you to Lynda and to Julia for talking about your activities. So that's not the beginning, actually. There we go. So I first got into the idea of doing something for White Ribbon at the CRN conference in 2024, I think it was, the year before last. And we had a discussion group around gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. And Sarah Grove, who might be on this call, talked about an event she did at Cambridge Station, where she was there early evening with different groups, talking to people about how safe they felt at stations. And I don't think it was held on White Ribbon Day, but when it came to South East Communities Rail Partnership signing up for White Ribbon last year, which was the first time they've done this, I thought, well, maybe we could do something at Reading Station. And I talked to Harriet. So I'm just going to move and you'll see the other picture of, there's Harriet with the British Transport Police. So Harriet Sargent is the Network Rail community manager at Reading Station. And we decided to do something, and they'd not done something previously for White Ribbon there. So having seen Julia's presentation and obviously Lynda's lovely hearts, it feels like ours was kind of like a bit more, we'll do a kind of standard White Ribbon event to try and make contact with people. But more importantly, as it was the first time we'd done one there, it was very much about building those partnerships. So we managed to get quite a group together. And also the most amazing thing about Reading Station is there's so many different station staff. So we had GWR, we had Network Rail, obviously, because it's a Network Rail managed station, GWR, SWR, Cross Country, the British Transport Police. We then had a contact with Reading Borough Council, and we had their domestic abuse officer, Umi, who came and worked with us. So that brought with it a whole other expertise, really. So they've been organising White Ribbon events in Reading for quite some time. They even had some extra giveaways which they were able to share with us. So we had a table with some bits and pieces. We also had some lovely hearts inspired by Lynda's campaign, even though we were in right over in Reading. The White Hearts in West Sussex reached out to us, and we had a lovely volunteer on the North Downs line who crocheted, I think it was about 300 hearts, and we attached them to the White Ribbon cards. So they went out as part of the message and were really well received. We had, there's Mikey there from Hampshire CRP, and we had other station staff from Network Rail. We had the GWR station ambassadors who were tremendously supportive. I think one of the key things was that engaging the staff could have happened earlier on the station. And I think that in future, when we do it next year, we try to make it over a period of a week so that you could try to build up some momentum. We also had an iPad where we had people signing up for the pledge for White Ribbon. We've got two lovely quotes here from Harriet about the event. It was very successful, but it did flag up a couple of issues that I think, because it brings up quite difficult situations talking to the public, which we did do. It was very proactive. We did manage to talk to lots of people. And I would say that I possibly will go and do the level 1 domestic abuse awareness course and the bystander training. And maybe as a line officer, those things need to be built in a little bit into our training. And that's the end of my presentation. Sorry, it's a little bit brief. I got a little bit disordered there. So any questions? Yes, but I think it definitely brought up a few issues about how we can I think the key thing is working in partnership with different groups so that you're not alone, having support from other line officers. And I think looking at Julia's presentation, the idea of doing something slightly different, you don't have to spend lots of money on the merchandise from White Ribbon. You can use the theme, but you can do something really creative. Like I love the train and the artwork. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sarah, very much. And as you say, yeah, I was there, and it was emotional. It was really, really quite a special event. Right, so last but not least, with something really quite different, I'm going to hand over to Alayne from Oxfordshire CRP.
Thank you, Jenny. Really enjoyed previous presentations as well. Thank you so much for bringing us all together to talk about this subject. It's something that's really close to my heart, and great to see the room full of people who share that passion. So my name is Alayne McDonald. I'm the Community Rail Development Manager for Oxfordshire Community Rail Partnership, or Ox CRP. For those of you that I've not had the pleasure of meeting before, just to give you a bit of background, we are a relatively young community rail partnership. We launched in September of 2023. We cover 22 stations across Oxfordshire and work very closely with our sister CRP in Gloucestershire as well, GCRP. I'd like to talk today, as Jenny said, it is very relevant to White Ribbon, but giving you a bit of a case study, I suppose, of a project that we've been delivering as part of a wider consortium of partners addressing violence and intimidation against women and girls on the rail network. So I'll go into that in a bit more detail. If you're happy to go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So the Embody project responds to really clear national and rail-specific evidence that VOG is unfortunately prevalent and perhaps at times underreported on public transports. Rail Delivery Group research has shown that 1 in 12 women have been affected by VOG on the rail network, and in 2025 alone there were nearly 4,000 serious offences recorded on rail, alongside sadly a 10% increase in sexual offences. Despite this, some research by WSP has found that of women they surveyed, 90% didn't know how to report instances on transport, pointing to, I feel, a major awareness and confidence gap. This tells us that staff need confidence and empathy and clarity on action, which is where the Embody project comes in. So Embody has been delivered through Innovate UK funding since September of last year and coming to an end now in March, addressing VOG from a staff perspective on the rail network. The output of this project will be an immersive, trauma-informed virtual reality training resource for frontline rail staff that essentially aims to build their confidence and skills to recognise, de-escalate and report instances when they see them. So as part of a wider consortium of partners, we've been working with Transport for the North, Standing Together, a domestic abuse service some of you may know of, British Transport Police, Juice Immersive, who are the VR developers on this project, and Maudsley Learning, who do quite a lot of training needs analysis and training development for the NHS actually. So within this group, our role as a community rail partnership has really centred on ensuring that lived experience and community voice through consultation surveys and focus groups has informed the scenario development of the content within the VR training module to ensure that it's sensitive, trauma-informed and community-led. Next slide, please. There's so much work going on in this space, and I do think actually before I get into the project delivery framework in a bit more detail, I just think it's important to recognise that there's so much happening across private, public and community sector with huge investment from BTP and Network Rail and our TOC partners. So I really want to keep that in the back of our minds when thinking about this topic, because it is a shared commitment across the board, which is why it's been so valuable working as part of a wider consortium on this, and I have learned so much. This is a brief kind of outline of the process that we've followed when developing the VR training. So Maudsley Learning, who I mentioned earlier, have been leading on the training needs analysis, where they did baseline research that went out to talks across across the UK to get sort of baseline insights into their current confidence levels, responding, de-escalating and reporting VOG, and any remaining skills gaps that our training resource could fill. Alongside that, from a community perspective, as the CRP, we did a pre-consultation community survey, which was kind of on the other side of the coin, gave us baseline insights into travel confidence barriers, existing community perceptions of staff, and some lived experience instance, so we could get a feel for the real range of experiences that women had across the network. Building on our survey findings, we then did 2 initial community consultation workshops where we went into that lived experience in much more detail to understand the emotional impact, the perceptions of staff intervention in those instances, and also kind of empower communities to make recommendations on what sort of non-verbal communication and sensitivity and reassurance could be built into the training resource. With all of those findings and insights in mind, the VR developers then got going with the scenario development, scripting and storyboarding, making sure that all 3 of the scenarios played out in the VR training were trauma-informed and grounded in those real experiences that we heard throughout the first few stages. Once we had draft scripts and scenarios and kind of concepts and storyboards, we then, as a CRP, got involved again, went back to our community partners and with women in our communities, evaluated the scenarios based on their realism, believability, relevance, worthiness, and impact. And now it's the fun bit. They're out at stations filming the VR training resource, and we're planning to launch with an industry demonstration event with March, with many of our top partners joining us for that, and hopefully beginning to integrate it within the industry and existing operational guidance. Next slide, please. This just goes into a bit more detail on our role within that wider timeline, which you saw on the last stage. So as I said, we did a pre-consultation survey with 34 women, 23 of whom had direct lived experience of VOG, 12 had witnessed VOG on the network, and 10 had both witnessed and experienced. Our community voice workshops, those were 2 sessions with 13 participants in total, all with lived experience of VOG on the network. And the third stage was the community refinement and testing sessions, making sure those scenarios were believable and authentic and sensitive, which were consisted of 2 further workshops with 15 participants in total, again, all with lived experience of VOG on the network. Next slide, please. What this slide shows is that VOG on rail is not one single type of incident, and we developed this in line with all the stories that we heard from women. It, to me, exists on a spectrum and ranges from subtle everyday behaviours to frankly serious criminal acts. At the covert end, women described behaviours such as staring, unwanted comments, or sitting too close, incidents that could often be dismissed or normalised or hard to evidence, but can deeply affect how safe someone feels when travelling. They may not meet a criminal threshold on their own, but the cumulative impact is really significant, shaping people's confidence and anxiety levels and even their future travel choices. And moving along the spectrum, we heard about overt intimidation and aggression, including verbal abuse, sexual harassment, threats. And women described situations that involved immediate personal danger, including assault and violence, where rapid and confident intervention from staff is really critical. But importantly, I think many incidents actually extend beyond the individual victim and create a general risk to other passengers. So what came through strongly here is that covert instances can escalate when unchallenged and without early intervention. And for me, it's why, working with our top partners to ensure that staff feel confident and supported to use their judgment and discretion in these spaces allows, ensures that low-level behaviours don't escalate. It also reinforces for me why trauma-informed training is so essential. And for us as a CRP, it's a key driver for ensuring the training scenarios were realistic of these nuanced situations and not just portraying extreme or obvious cases. Next slide, please. Forgive the formatting, That's a surprise for me as well. Hopefully you can read some of this here though. This slide depicts, captures the emotional language that women used themselves in our sessions when describing their experiences. Words like vulnerable or traumatized or small. And I think it's important to recognize that these emotions aren't fleeting. For many women, they persist long after the incident has ended. And feelings such as fear, hypervigilance can really affect long-term travel confidence, especially when journeys are repeated or unavoidable. Women told us, and I think many of us could maybe relate, that once you've lost that confidence, every future journey is kind of assessed through this risk lens. What's the time of day? Where are the exits? Is it peak time? Are there going to be staff? And over time, this can lead to significant travel behaviour change, like avoiding certain stations or routes, or avoiding rail travel altogether. In fact, our pre-consultation survey really reflected this, with 1 in 3 women reporting that they had avoided journeys altogether due to safety concerns. But beyond travel behaviour, I think it's really important to note that there's a clear well-being impact here as well. Heightened anxiety and stress, lack of a loss of independence or a sense of isolation, which is why that staff response being reassuring and validating and visible can really interrupt that emotional harm and help rebuild confidence. And for us, these insights and these words here on the screen really help to reinforce that VOG on our public transport networks it's not just a case of preventing crime, it's about supporting community well-being and enabling people to move freely and confidently and independently. Next slide, please. I've borrowed this graphic here on the left, actually, from someone from WSP who joined our steering group recently, but it was too good not to share. I'm mindful of time, so I won't spend time going through the whole thing, but it does give you a gendered perspective on rail, and I'm sure so many of us in the room, regardless of gender or demographics or age or background, will relate, and it gives context to that risk assessing lens of every thought that goes through your mind from the moment you leave your door to the moment you arrive at your destination. So I do recommend going back and looking at the slides in more detail, because it was, it really resonated with me seeing that image the other day. But next slide, please, Gary. So I've given a bit of an overview on some of the findings and insights that we had come through from workshops already, but I do think, some kind of top line takeaways for us. Some obvious things as well, perhaps that aren't so surprising, like groups and events and crowding influencing travel choices, and perhaps safety perception dropping at night for a lot of women, but also consistently that request from participants for staff visibility, attentiveness, sensitivity and reassurance came through. And I think, this quote here at the bottom right, from a workshop participant, if you have a chance to read it, I think it really highlights something I wish I had more detail to go into today, but around that intersectionality factor. Not every woman will respond or experience an incident in the same way. And it's really important to understand how intersectionality affects the way we move through our network. Next slide, please. I'm mindful that this is a heavy topic. It is a challenging topic, but it's a really important one. And I know that we probably all agree with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here today. But I'm mindful that it's important to end, hopefully, with a bit of inspiration and kind of encouragement and call for collaboration, because it is easy to feel unmotivated or disillusioned by some of this at times, and admittedly I certainly have at points throughout this project. But I just want to close with a few thoughts and learnings for me, really, of to be bold and brave and confident when talking about this. It is everyone's business, regardless of your gender, your age, your background, your ethnicity. It is everyone's business, and building a railway that's safer for women and girls makes it safer for absolutely everyone. And the space that we occupy as CRPs is a really legitimate place to start this action. That being said, often we do have limited time and capacity and resource in the community sector. So my advice would be to build on what already exists. I've included here, a WSP strategy and the UK government's policy on freedom from violence and abuse. This national legislation and policy commitments is out there. If you want to do something in this space, that can really strengthen your funding case, and it can also give you a really good evidence base to start from, using existing research, data and lived experience to lead new locally led interventions. And start local. It is a great place to start, and think scalable. Small place-based projects can test ideas and demonstrate impact and shape policy. CRPs with support from organisations like CRN are increasingly becoming trusted voices in this space, and it's about maximising our opportunity to feed back our local data and insights into regional and national conversations like the one we're having right here. And one final thought from me, we don't need all the answers. It is a huge subject. The language is always changing. I certainly entered the project with my own preconceptions and assumptions and biases, which maybe I wasn't aware of at the time. But as a woman and as someone who's experienced Vogue on the network, I kind of thought, I'm not going to be too surprised on what comes out of this. It's all quite predictable, isn't it? I was continually, with every workshop we did, blown away by the recommendations and suggestions of women locally, and stunned by their own, creativity and things that I'd never considered. So that's where partnership, collaboration, and listening to local people with different experiences and different intersectionality really strengthens our case. So yeah, next slide, Gary. I've just included my contact details here if anyone would like to get in touch and learn more, but equally really interested to learn from everyone in the group. So thank you very much for having me.
Wow, thank you very much, Alayne. That was such a fascinating presentation, and loads of food for thought. I'm sure everybody's mind is spinning with all the possibilities. And yeah, thank you to all of the presenters for everything. I know that everybody has said they'd be happy to be contacted. So we've only got about 10 minutes left for questions. But I know that you can contact everybody directly if you want to. So I will stop talking. Has anybody got any questions to ask?
Hi, I've put one in the chat. I just wanted to know when you're going to share the presentations so that I can share them with people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did see that. So I would say within the week. We'll have to get someone else to do it for us, but within the week, and I can certainly send out the link to everybody once it's up there.
Oh, right. I don't think you've got my address, Jenny, because someone shared your original invitation. So I'll email you so you've got it.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fiona.
Hi, it's more just as a heads up, actually. I hear from our transport officers that we work with really closely that the DfT has asked transport at county level and at local government level to concentrate on women and girls' safety on transport next year. So it's a good time to get involved and be informed by all these wonderful presentations. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you. Darren.
Don't know why I'm not shown on the screen, sorry. But yeah, here I am, sorry. Some fantastic, great work out there, community rail partnerships, people coming together. It's absolutely brilliant. One of the areas that I find that I struggle with at times when I'm trying to do a white ribbon campaign or engage people in this is it is quite an emotive topic and subject. Women are fantastic at supporting each other in this because primarily it affects them the most. But trying to engage with men to step up, to be better allies, and to make them aware of this subject, even though they think it doesn't impact them, but they can have a massive impact. Has anybody got anything that they've implemented that they could share in engaging better with men to get them to step up to say, look, women are not the problem. Men are the perpetrators responsible for most of these crimes against women. We need to step into that space to be comfortable to do so, non-confrontational, not come in with fisticuffs, but to use their voice to speak up and to intervene, to validate somebody's experience. Has anybody got anything that they've done that can be shared to gain momentum and get more men involved, because it's our responsibility to step in to make places feel safe?
Julia?
Yeah, so I think with that one, it's like I was saying, with a lot of our projects, we try and think about how we can engage generally with people, but I get your point, particularly with this one. It's what we don't want to do is to make men in particular feel like they're being told off, or kind of, you know, told that they need to be better, and because that makes people shut down and makes people defensive. They don't, you know, they don't want to be told that, or they kind of go, well, I'm fine, you know, why, I do what I can already, you know, why do I need to keep doing more? And also, it's a lot of the time with this sort of white ribbon campaign, it's the subtle things, you know, have you forwarded on a meme from someone, for example, or have you kind of let a bit of banter slide where actually maybe you shouldn't do? It's those little things that you don't realize every day. So doing things like we did when we took over the train, for example, when I said that that allowed for natural conversation to happen, it really did, because, you know, we just talked to people, and it kind of it dropped men and women's defenses, and the conversations were more easygoing. It wasn't, they didn't feel like we were trying to get anything out of them. And I've worked on other projects, not to do with white women, but other things where we haven't gone in just to talk about anxiety, for example. We've gone in, and again, we've used art quite a lot for this. So when we used artwork to help people with anxiety, we taught them different artistic techniques to help them, you know, like doodling techniques if they're in a position where they do feel anxious. And while they were kind of doing the workshops, the conversations then developed naturally, and they built that trust with us, and then they started talking to us more. So I think if you can find almost something else, we've also had like walking groups where again it was about supporting men and men's mental health, but again it was the walk that we did, and that helped encourage those natural conversations. I think that's always a really good idea to do.
Lovely. Gary, did you have something to add about that?
Yeah, I was just going to post something in the chat, but there is an organisation called Man Culture Plymouth that have been doing some fantastic work locally, including involving Plymouth Argyle Football Club in a stand up to harassment campaign. So I'll post a little link. It's really interesting, and I have connected them with GWR, so I think there's going to be some work coming out of that soon.
Lovely, thank you. Lynda?
It's interesting that you just mentioned the football clubs. We when we were doing the white knitted hearts, I just happened to be given a bag of hearts in front of a station partner from Worthing Football Club, who immediately sort of took them off me and said, "Oh, I'm going to give these out to fans on the day at the next home game." So that I was quite taken aback by that, but I thought, well, what a lovely thing to start a conversation with predominantly men. And I think football is a great way in, actually, to start those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else got anything either on the men, or we've probably got time for one more question, and then it's just flown by, hasn't it? But if you do have follow-up questions, obviously send them to me or go directly to our speakers, and we will pass those on. Any more questions before we start to wrap up? Fiona?
It's just an idea really, because we're looking at sort of issues that really affect sort of women and girls as they travel. But there are other issues about how we design transport systems and what sort of campaigns and initiatives that we support. So there's loads of information out there. There's a UN report on transport, which is quite old now, but still stands today. And it really gets you thinking about, well, some of the decisions that are made, for example, about what are the priorities. So, for example, when we were handing out the White Harts at Eastbourne, so we covered quite a few areas that day, one of the local councillors was talking to me about their gritting policy. And they were saying how backwards it is and how the main roads are gritted. But actually what you really want to do is do all the routes around residential areas and towards schools, because one, that's where all the accidents happen, and two, it allows you to get out of your road, and then the main roads look after themselves. But it's interesting as to how that decision came. That's just like one wee example. There are loads of stuff all over the place, and it would just be really good to have a discussion through CRN about that and investigate some of those possibilities.
Yeah, thanks. That's it's really interesting, isn't it? Anyone who's read sort of Invisible Women, which is so many sort of nuanced, tiny little things that we're all just used to. Okay, well, it's time to wrap up. Canna, I noticed a comment you put where people are talking about what went wrong. I agree. It's so useful. We don't need sugar-coated, shiny examples of everything, because we're all learning all the time, aren't we? So thank you very much for that comment. Is there anything else anyone wants to add before we wrap up? Okay, so when the link is ready for the YouTube, I'll send it out to everyone whose email I've got. If this was passed on to you, and I don't have your email address, please get in touch. So thank you once again to all of the guest speakers for sharing your inspiration, your insights, your experiences. It just goes to show how much opportunity there is, you know, in community rail. We are so uniquely placed to get those hyper-local interventions and to really make a difference to our communities as well. So thank you very much. I'm sure all of this will be of great value to everyone in the audience who is looking to plan their own projects, and we will come back together to think about the year ahead. Please remember, you can catch up on all the other webinars that we do as well through those links, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Jenny.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Jenny, bye.